All right, everyone, it's 5:40 and I call this meeting to order. Let's please stand for the pledge of brief moment of silence. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, everyone, thank you. All right, our first task then is to get the agenda for this evening. Let's look at it.
I'll make a motion.
Jason beat you to the bus. The second.
I'll second.
We have a first and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, the same. All right. Agenda's been approved.
Yeah, so I'm going to introduce our guest tonight. So Ryan Heater is the VP of Government Relations at IEC. So Ryan's been on the job now.
Almost a year.
It's almost a year? Okay.
A month, yeah.
Yeah, so he leads the team from a government relations standpoint, which, as all of you guys know, is a very, very important task that, we really rely on IEC to be our lobbyists, whether it's at the federal or the state level. So anyways, Ryan's got the stage. He's going to go over kind of a few slides of what they do. And again, I did lay out, so you all have it. And Ryan, I forget, when is the actual due date, if you want to?
So ideally, we want to, it's kind of a fuzzy term, because I'm learning this myself, but ideally, December 1st, I think, is a real helpful timeline for us. Of course, we're going to take them without it, but yeah, if December 1st is ideal, if we could at least minimum know, I should say, on the pledges even sooner, so we can make sure we're recognizing with the annual meeting as being a participant, that's really helpful too, because we don't want to get in the late November, 1st of December scramble and say, here, you guys are committing or something's coming in, that sort of thing. I want to be able to recognize each co-op individually at the annual meeting.
So if you want to be recognized and you plan on donating the pack, December 1st kind of date. And we typically kind of do this a little bit later. So Steve actually asked, hey, can Ryan come a little earlier? So
Let's do it earlier.
anyway, it's right here. You would send it in individually if you choose to give. So, yeah. Ryan, I'm going
Appreciate
to
it.
give it over to you.
Thanks, Brad. I appreciate it. Thanks for allowing me to be here today with you this evening. I just wanted to kind of briefly introduce myself and kind of a quick GR update. Of course, talk about PAC and grassroots, but just a quick background on myself. A few of you, I know Brett's heard me say this before, my pitch to kind of make you feel like I'm at home. I'm entering to the group is I grew up in rural Indiana on a farm on a co-op line. So I'm not some generic lobbyist from Indianapolis who has no clue what you're doing. I love rural Indiana. In fact, had I not married a girl from Fishers, I would probably be living back in rural Indiana. But when she suggests we need more acreage, I told her I know where I get a deal on some farmland, and she goes, not that far. So that's the only thing really, I think, at least where I'm living, is tying me closer to the metro area. But I grew up in Pulaski County. If you think it's pronounced Pulaski, backwards folks from that county say Pulaski. So you know you're from there when you say it that way. But yeah, I grew up on a farm there. I have farm ground on both sides of the family, and both my mom and dad are still there. So I get that pretty regularly if I can. But went to Purdue, and then I've kind of been in state government ever since graduating. So I worked in the General Assembly for about 5+ years. Worked in the Lieutenant Governor's office for 5+ years. I actually worked for the 3 different LGs, both are all Sue Ellspermann, then Eric Holcomb, and then Suzanne Crouch. And then after that, I went to work for the IURC, the Utility Regulatory Commission, as chief of staff. So that's where I got my energy chops and figured out kind of a little bit about this industry. And by no means any bit of an expert, I get to be surrounded by those who are. So, and then I came to IEC. I was not looking to leave. I wasn't. I was happy where I was at, but an opportunity to go and advocate for folks that you're proud to advocate for, those opportunities don't always come along. So I had to jump at it, and I'm very happy to be here. So I appreciate the opportunity to work for you and the other members across the state. from a GR standpoint, I think you can go to the next slide, Brett, if you don't mind. I'm going to kind of just cover some of go ahead to the next one after this. Just kind of some issues that we're focused on. And the running joke here between this slide and the next one is Mike Braun is on both because he's likely going to be our next governor, currently U.S. Senator, so he gets to be on both state and federal issues slide. But when it comes to, these are kind of the highlight bullets I like to track, just kind of big picture stuff we're on. Poll attachments is always going to be a big one. We don't anticipate any major issues this upcoming session, but that doesn't mean we aren't playing defense and being prepared for it. And in fact, Brett, your name was invoked in a meeting today with Senator Garten. So in a good way, telling the story. Michael and I were down there meeting with Senator Chris Garten from, I guess Sellersburg is his hometown, but he is the number 2 senator in the Senate caucus. He's a former Marine. You'll know it when you meet him, type of guy. But he is hard charging and supportive of co-ops. And we were talking about the poll attachment issue. And oddly enough, he got an email early in the morning from a certain cable provider complaining about another member. And boy, did we correct the record. So we are doing that regularly to make sure they understand what the cable companies in particular, and I don't know how, I know I've seen Brett a little upset after, it's good, or in a good way, just fired up about some stuff, because I know you're dealing with it here, and we appreciate you downloading on Michael. They're on our team to advocate, make sure legislators are aware of the issues, because the Comcasts of the world and the other cable companies will lobby hard and not be very truthful and honest when they're doing that with legislators. That's my own personal opinion, but they're difficult to deal with, both at the legislature and here locally on the operations side. So I don't mean to ramble on it, but poll attachments are very serious, and Michael and I on the current team are invoking it in every conversation we have with every legislator, just saying, hey, this is an issue to be aware of. This is something we're keeping an eye on. And if you're hearing complaints from cable companies about co-ops not allowing folks to attach, that's not the case. There's a lot of illegal attachments across the state, and they're asking for timelines that are completely unreasonable, or they're making these massive requests knowing they're going to bother the RMC. So we're just getting the message out the way we can. So yeah, we gave the example that you're dealing with here today to Senator Garten, and it was very proceeding. So that's a good reason why it's helpful for us to have that intel. BEAD and broadband. So broadband is obviously something a number of our members are getting into. I know you're doing that here. The BEAD program is, I get the acronym. I was asked this the other evening. I think it's Broadband Equity, Accessibility, and Deployment. It's a federal program funded by the Inflation Reduction Act. BEAD is what it is. This is going to be about $867 million coming to the state that will be managed by the Indiana Broadband Office and then available in grants to service providers across the state to go build additional broadband infrastructure. It's a lot of money. It ties back into that poll attachment issue. There's going to be a flood of money to the state, both to co-ops and other providers, and that will increase poll attachment requests, we anticipate. So that's why we're hammering the poll attachment thing with our legislators. But this is going to be a good program for those members across the state who want to apply for it. We're having a meeting tomorrow with the broadband office to get additional details as they're beginning to kick off the process for applications, et cetera. So always monitoring that closely. Reliability and generation is a big topic. There is a lot of, I call mega loads happening or potentially being discussed across the state. And there's a lot of concern about reliability of the system, both here and really, I mean, nationally. It came up in the conversation with Senator Garten today. He's starting to get really worried about it. When he gets into an issue, look out. So it'll be interesting to see what he does, if anything, in the coming session. But fortunately, we've got a really good relationship with the House and Senate utilities chairs, and they are currently conducting kind of this unofficial think tank discussion group. The co-ops are represented by Donna Walker from Hoosier. She's being the voice of the cooperative system. I did ask Chairman Saldi if I could be in the room, and was told flat out, no, I don't want any lobbyists in it. So by being registered lobbyist, I'm not allowed to be there. But fortunately, I have a very good relationship with him and Senator Cook, and we talk to them regularly, and they seem very appreciative of the co-op voice in the room. One thing I keep hammering with in this discussion with policymakers, et cetera, that are worried about the grid is that, hey, guess what? You have IOUs who have shareholders to answer to. Co-ops are flexible and nimble. Decisions are made in the boardroom, and it's done locally. And that message seems to be resonating that co-ops are a place that can handle this kind of stuff. So I have territory protection there as a bullet we're tracking. Obviously, all of that's been kind of solidified over the years, including the annexation issue that happened, I think, 7 or 8 years ago. There's no issue here, but I just put it up there because it's something that we always want to keep top of mind and make sure our folks are protected across the state. But it also highlights the achievements we've made over the past few decades as well there too. And then regulatory fair, a number of agencies across the state that have impacted on your businesses. I mentioned the broadband office, the IURC, we're all not regulated, but the IURC where I came from beforehand does have generation approval for the GNTs across the state. So that's a good relationship to have. IDEM, tax issues, anything like that may come up. We're going to be watching it and keeping an eye on it carefully. We can go to the next slide, Brett. Again, you'll see it's pretty similar list of bullets. Poll taxes again at the federal level. Fortunately, we've got NRECA that we work closely with out in DC, but cable companies are excuse the language, a real pain in the butt in DC as well. They have an army of lobbyists. I saw a slide deck from NRECA several months ago at a conference. It kind of blew my mind. They have, and I'm not kidding, hundreds of registered lobbyists in DC, just looking at the cable industry alone. I think it was 300 or 400 individuals registered. That's people who are actually registered. There's other people who are working on the issue for them that are not registered. And we're talking millions and millions of dollars spent on lobbying in DC. So where they try to mess with things at the state level, they do the same thing in DC, and that's where we get to work with our NRECA partners there, and then kind of help deliver that message to our federal legislators as well. Farm Bill, obviously a lot of funding for USDA happens to the Farm Bill. I assume most of you are aware that the current Farm Bill technically expired last year on September 30th and was extended by a year. Guess what? They're going to have to extend it again. They're not going to get it done by September 30th of this year or an election cycle. And so it's not going to happen.
So we'll go for the whole year then.
So the hope is, I need to double check. I haven't checked in on what they'll do for the one that's supposed to expire in about a month, but I meant they'll probably extend it, hopefully, and extend it for at least 6 to 12 months is what I'm hearing. There's one provision. So I should note on the Farm Bill side, there's the Senate and the House will both put out their versions that they want. The Senate has not yet passed anything out of committee. The House did out of the House Ag Committee. There is a provision in the Farm Bill that we do have concern with, both here and nationally, is they have a prohibition on financial assistance from USDA for any solar development projects that would happen on U.S. prime farmland. If you check a map, Indiana is pretty well covered in a lot of farmland. So while I get the point of what somebody's doing there, we believe it was to appease a certain congressman from Georgia who was very anti-solar. Our message is don't tie the hands of the cooperatives, because that's who's primarily going to be affected by this, of making decisions that are right for their local co-op. We don't anticipate it staying in. I've talked to NREC lobbyists as well as Congressman Baird, who sits on the House Ag Committee from Indiana. It was probably just put in there to help move the bill and will likely get taken out. And as far as we understand, the Senate's not even going to entertain that provision, but something to keep an eye on. EPA power plant rule. This is the rules that would basically require all existing coal plants and new gas plants. I can't remember if it's new or old. I apologize. But they require significant upgrades and scrubbers and cleaners and essentially soon to be carbon sequestration projects in order to keep those plants running longer if they are scheduled to go out a certain time frame, I think into the 2030s. Really, the big picture here is these new rules from the Biden administration are in order to retire coal early as possible. NRECA and the attorney generals, I think 26 of them from across the state have filed, are two co-lead litigants in some major litigation at the federal level, trying to get those rules essentially stopped. The DC Circuit Court was the first to hear it on the NRECA lawsuit in the request to stay the rules, meaning put them on pause so they could be further litigated, was denied. So technically the rules are still in place. But they have appealed that to the Supreme Court, and hopefully we'll get a favorable ruling to stop the rules. They'll be litigated. That'll probably take a couple of years, much like the previous power plant rule from the Obama administration. So we'll continue to kind of monitor that with NRECA, but we have weighed in heavily with our congressional delegation. I'm going to get my number incorrect here. I think it's at least, I think both U.S. senators and at least 7, maybe 6 of our House members joined a letter together signaling their opposition to this and actually referenced some feedback provided by IEC and other electric associations of the state. So we've got a good contingency of a delegation in support of our position on that. And then also we anticipate that they all signed on to they call it Congressional Review Acts that would overturn rules, all signed on to support those as well. Those aren't going to move in Congress, but it's a good signal. They're all very supportive. And then just generally other program funding at the federal level, we'll try to keep an eye on and share information with that. Next slide. This is just a quick slide on our legislative conference. I'd just like to point out it was pretty successful this year. We had a good showing from Indiana, so hope to see Decatur included in the future as well. But I feel like it was a good showing. Contingency from Indiana. I think we're one of the top 5 states that shows up each year. What I will tell you why I point this out is because my background lends me to be more state focused and less federal, but now I'm taking on a lot of these federal things and working out and making a few different trips in DC. And what I have found that has surprised me the most, you get away from policy and discussion, is really just showing up matters out there. We've got good relationships with our federal delegation, but what I keep hearing from them, their staffs, and NRECA is it means more than you would believe if you come out here and share your voice. So I've been out probably 3 or 4 times since I've taken the job, and I keep getting reiterated that how important it is for us to share Indiana Cooperative's perspective. And also it allows me to build relationships with staff, which is very, very key. So go to the next one, Brett, please. Thank you. Quick update on the PAC. We started talking about it, Brett, so thank you. Yes, I know I've checking the list beforehand. Decatur has been a 100% participant in the past. Hope to see that in the future. If you can get some additional major donors out of this co-op, that's my pitch to ask for some more contributions. These PACs matter. We are creatures of statute going back to the 30s, and we are embedded in policy making, and it's important to play in this way to make sure our voice is heard. And I can tell you it matters. So we contribute heavily at the federal level to those that are favorable to us. You guys sit in the 4th congressional district, so I know he's retiring, but Congressman Pence has been a huge advocate for co-ops, and particularly having him on the ENC committee has been a tremendous asset for us. So unfortunately, we're going to lose him on ENC as well as Congressman Bucshon, but we have made significant contributions to both he and Bucshon. Senator Houser from down in the 9th, Congressman Baird in the 4th. Numbers wrong. And then we are going to have some new members. I know you're going to have a new one here as well, but we take those dollars on the congressional side and make big contributions, and it's heavily well recognized. Same on the state. We contribute heavily both to the all 4 caucuses. In particular, I like to point out that we are increasing our contributions to Speaker Todd Houston and President Pro Tem Rod Bray. Those are the key policymakers on the state, and they run their caucuses very well. And I think we show up well in participating in their re-election efforts. And in reality, big picture is on the PAC side of things. I like to say we punch up above our weight. Even before I came to IEC, the REMCs were always recognized as somebody who has a strong political influence in Indiana, and that continues because of these PACs. So that's my pitch to see continued participation, and we do really greatly appreciate it. And last note on this, I'll point out that we make all of our checks are hand delivered. Michael and I on the team, and we'll hope that's somebody soon. We make sure every check is hand delivered to every member that we donate to. So we either have big events where we have like Senator Braun we had a few weeks ago where we delivered his gubernatorial check to him at IEC. We're working on some other congressional events soon with bigger meetings and or dinners. And then every state candidate as well is hand delivered. So we don't just like mail a check out. We leverage a coffee, a lunch, or breakfast. And like I said today, we were down there with Senator Garden to deliver his check to him. So that we spent 2 hours with him over lunch just talking about everything policy wise. It was terrific. So and then the last one, this is my last slide, and then a couple of little things I'll mention after that. But this is our slide on the Grassroots Political Engagement Network. I did not check to see who from Decatur has signed up, but if you have your phone out and you want to scan that code and get signed up, if you aren't already, we would greatly appreciate it. This network is an incredible tool for Indiana electric cooperatives across the state. We use this primarily just to share information with you all, to keep you engaged and aware of some of the issues, as well as your key staff and even member consumers if you have them that want to sign up. And really what it is, it's a tool that we can use in the future, but it hasn't been active in the last year or so. And so we're trying to get it stood back up, and we'll be getting a welcome message out to everybody saying, hey, we're doing this again. And then we'll start delivering at most a monthly email with some general information, similar to what I just kind of discussed today, or at minimum quarterly. So it's nothing that we're going to bombard inboxes with too many emails. It's just a simple way of providing information on things that we're keeping an eye on, or to educate folks on things that are happening. And really, it's just the more engagement we have, we think it better sets us up if we ever have to use the tool. And when I say use it, meaning activate it. And some of you may have been around. We haven't activated it in years, but when I say activate, means actually make an ask of those who are signed up to go weigh in with their policymakers, legislators across the state on an issue. And I think it was back in 2017 was the last time it was activated, where everybody signed up on the network was asked to send an email to their legislator on a piece of legislation. I believe it was the easement bill back then. And the story goes, what I've heard is where you can see the real impact is at the time, I think the chairman was Dave Ober in the House Utilities Committee. I guess the network was activated and emails started getting delivered into inboxes for legislators. And as a former staffer there, all those emails are seen and they're tracked, and all those numbers are reported to the legislator. And when those start showing up, his colleagues were coming to him on the House floor and saying, hey, I'm getting a lot of emails from my local co-op. What the heck is going on in your committee? And apparently Dave Ober had to go to Scott Bauer, my previous predecessor, and say, hey, got it, message received, please turn it off. Got it. And they moved the legislation. So when I tell you this actually works, and when we activate it, it matters, it does. As a former staffer, I saw these kind of emails. When you see something pop up like this, especially when we wouldn't use it very often, it will make an impact. So that's my pitch to try and get as many people signed up as possible. And we won't share any other information other than just general updates, and it'll just be your name, co-op, and email that we'll keep on hand and share with nobody else. So, and then finally, I just wanted to mention, I know I mentioned our GR team. Allie exited several months ago, but I'm in the process of rehiring right now. Got it down to a few more candidates that are going to be meeting with our leadership team soon, but we'll have a third person, third lobbyist on the team fairly soon. And I'm very confident in some of the candidates we have. So I just want to make sure you're aware of that. That concludes my presentation. So I'm happy to take questions. We can talk dirty politics if you want or whatever, but I'm happy to be here. So
You really don't want to go there.
yeah, there it is.
Yeah. Anybody got any questions? Ryan, we really appreciate what you guys do. I know Michael has been on my doorstep about any more pole attachment stuff. So
Yes.
you're aware of your twos and everything with Comcast. So appreciate you guys fighting for us.
Yeah, thank you.
Anybody else got any question? Thanks, Ryan. If not, Ryan, yeah, you don't need to.
I may take off, you know.
Yeah.
I got little kids at home, in case you're wondering, right? So that my wife is wondering, when are you gonna be back? So, yeah. So thank you. Thank you very much. Good to see you all.
Thank you, Ryan.
Appreciate it.
Yep. Be safe traveling.
Thank you.
Brett, I'm gonna get out of here, folks. It was a pleasure.
Anytime.
Every one of you.
Thanks for coming in, Johnny.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
I was gonna ask what are the levels.
A little extra.
Or you can just eat it.
Didn't you?
I don't.
I think so. I think you did. I know.
Just to follow up with what Ryan talked about, I do encourage you all to at least look at this and give it some serious thought. Next item then is safety minute and call moment, Brett.
All right, so my safety moment is a personal endeavor that I had. So I was on the phone outside my house and noticed that we had some underground hornets. And so I didn't realize how bad it was until I paid attention to it for a little bit. But knowing pictures like this and what these ground hornets can do with my kids and dogs, I thought I'd better do something. So we actually took a shop vac, put it next to the hole with a 2x4 and let it run for a couple hours. And that worked. I got stung one time. That was it. But it ended up getting, somehow or another, it sucked the queen out, and we shook it with a rake, and all the rest of them left and never come back. Anyway, the reason I'm bringing that up is both of my sons were over there messing with it, and I'm like, you have no idea what can happen. Oh, they're just bees or just bees. So I showed him a few videos and it can really be deadly. These ground horns, man, they just look like little bees. They pack a punch. I know my hand, I got stung right here and it swelled up in days.
They
can
dig down 10 feet.
It's crazy. It is. Yeah, I've learned that too. So be careful when you're dealing with ground hornets. They are, someone told me that if you shoot a bullet at them, they can follow where that bullet came from. They're so like instincts are so. And actually when I was, and this will be the end of the story, when I was sucking them with that shot back, the ones that were coming in like swarmed that shot back. I think it was just the noise and all that stuff. And it was crazy just to see that. I was at a comfortable 30 feet away. But anyway, that's my safety moment. Cool moment. So first I got two cool moments this month. So the first one is Steve Nobby finished his CCD and got his little lapel and your plaque. So congratulations. And then the second cool moment, we actually, if you guys knew, we had our live med rodeo last week. So we had a team so we did fairly well. The guys will tell you they didn't do as well as what they wanted to, but they still placed in some areas. So they got second place in the hurt and rescue.
I told you that.
That was Colin, Evan, Joe. And then overall, Caleb placed, so that's the big one. Caleb placed third overall. So overall, the apprentice, he got third place. And then you can see what else up there. So anyway, congratulations to those guys. They did an awesome job. I think that it was a very good team thing.
I told you
All
all
that.
that.
So,
My mom.
No.
good job, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate it.
All right, next item then is for your information. Does anyone have any questions based upon either of those items? These items for your information. How do we get that ruling changed of how the height on the?
Yeah, so I'm doing a little digging on that. The problem, I think that they've struggled in the past, Carl, that would have been a good question to ask Ryan too. And
I know.
I'll follow up with him, but the problem is there's a lot of stuff out there that it would be practically impossible to go out and fix what's already out there. And so,
Some places don't make sense because they bury it in one spot and then they bring it back out and go again and they bury it again. It don't make any good sense to me.
so Carl and I were talking, and just so everyone knows, there's a over the road clearance requirement. There's over a driveway. So I think it was 15.5 over a road, 15 over a driveway. Everything else is basically 9.5. Well, you guys know that these combines and things are way over 9.5 feet. And so Carl's comment is what's got to happen? So I'm going to take an action item on that, Carl, because I honestly don't know what the first step would even be to embark on that. I mean, that's a national safety code. So I don't know to answer your question,
But when you say over a road, are you talking a highway or any?
Any road, just like any bridge
Okay.
has got a height.
But I think Carl's point is where he gets into like any farm or where you guys get in, 9.5 is the requirement. You can't hardly fit anything under 9.5.
Well, you put a gravel patch right there, pull in and call that a driveway. They have to go 15 feet there.
Yeah, it's all the way long.
Good question.
I'm just saying, if you have one spot, you would figure out miles. Yeah.
Reading and getting those fixed, because like I said you a picture, I think there's one, maybe most of mine are fixed as well. Is that our guys doing it, or how does that issue resolve?
So we have a contract through both of yours to where we enacted the language in our contract, which basically gives you a number. So we call that number and then they give us a ticket basically, and we tell them what pulls it is and they send a crew out. They have I forget the number of days. I want to say it's like 45.
So who was it in my area?
That's Comcast. And both of your two went to Ryan too, to show him that these are existing, I mean, those are ones we knew of, right?
Yeah. I mean, the one I sent you,
Oh,
it's 3 feet off the ground.
He ain't joking.
It's literally, you can't, you're right, walk back. You cannot walk back.
I'll get some more information though, Carl, because I really don't know the steps to even, I know there's like a open period at some point, but I don't know how. I'll find out.
Anyone have anything else for your information? We good to go to the next item? So, we have July board meeting, minutes to approve along with, what was done in executive session. On one motion to cover both unless somebody has any modifications that they need to do.
I'll make a motion.
So we have a first, Dale.
Second.
So we have a motion to approve the minutes of both the July board meeting and executive session. All in favor, say aye. Opposed, the same. Okay, so they both have been. Next item is fiber project update. Sam, you're gonna share a little bit more with us on that.
Yeah, real quick. So, we named Sam as the technology manager. So Sam's going to be heading up the broadband thing. So I'm probably going to invite him in here often just to give you guys updates because he's living this every day. And so
Okay.
I'm going to turn it over to Sam.
All right, so just to let you guys know where we're at and some statuses, of course, you're aware of the NLC 4 grant, the Okra grant. We did receive it, but we've yet to receive the requirements from the state to fully accept it, to understand what's required in order to accept it, what we'd have to do those measures. I got word back from them today that grant agreement is currently waiting for final approval from the Office of Budgetary Management and Treasury at the state. And it's their hope that this will be wrapped up as soon as possible and the grant agreement will be sent out as soon as possible.
Whatever that means.
Originally, they had told me mid-August, so I really truly am hoping that it's within the next week or two that we will get the grant requirements. And then we can say, yes, we truly do accept the grant, or no, we wouldn't accept the grant, and then truly start the fiber project. So that's kind of been the holdup for that piece. In the meantime of that, though, we've been working with Entrust on finalizing a scope of work for that phase, for that grant. So that way, once we do accept it, we'll be able to start running with it as soon as possible. We did finalize an MPSA with Entrust. And then we have now started working on a marketing campaign and strategy around fiber. So once again, once we accept that and grant requirement, we can begin the marketing piece of that to let the members know what addresses will be coming to them with fiber. And part of that is also communicating to the members that we currently aren't going to, but we'll be applying for BEAD dollars to come to them eventually too. So that's all part of that strategy we're starting to work out now. And along the other lines of that, another piece that has to be finished up is the CI data. So we have a working meeting with them this Friday to get further along with that and try to wrap that up soon. And the next steps, of course, after the NLC 4 grant is BEAD that Ryan had mentioned before. The state has opened up the pre-application window or pre-approval window. So you have to apply, put your application in for pre-approval. That way you're ready for when they actually do release it, you'll be in the running. So they're encouraging everybody to do the pre-approval. So you have to do this in order to apply for the BEAD. That window opened up Monday and it will run through September 26th. And we anticipate getting our application in within the month to be able to apply for BEAD. And then Ryan also mentioned we do have a meeting with Steve Cox, who's leading the Indiana broadband office tomorrow up at IEC to discuss BEAD and other items on the agenda for broadbands. That's kind of where we're at. I feel like members probably think we're at a stalemate, and unfortunately, we're just kind of waiting on some grant requirements, pieces from the state to be able to start the project truly. Anybody have any questions about where we're at or?
So Trust is the company that will actually be putting the fiber up?
So Interest is the company that we'll be working with that will be managing the project. We will be working with local contractors or other contractors with their project management to help do that.
So given the information that we kind of gathered last week and the boring that's been going on, what does that change? Does it change anything? How does that affect our strategy? Because it maybe so yeah, members are asking, they think that's us. Like, oh, it's here, we're getting the, oh. So I have some concerns over that, how we're gonna handle that.
Well, and that's why we're starting the marketing campaign strategy. We aren't ready to release that and I'm hesitant myself without knowing the grant requirements and knowing 100% that we accept the grant to go out and say, these are the addresses that we're going to touch. Because there's.
Could it change the addresses that we're gonna touch? Could it change?
I don't know. I really don't know what will be in that requirement. I will tell you, some of the addresses that we have in our grant, SEI Data also got just a few of those for, the ICP grant. So there's some duplicates in there. So the requirements may come out and we may move, some addresses may get moved around.
Is there, this sounds very bad, but is there someone that is like monitoring where these dollars are going per address to make sure that addresses are not granted twice?
They're doing the best they can, but
Because I mean, in that scenario, okay, for instance, I know that they're coming down the old Frontier line. I don't know if I can. Anyway, they're coming and they're stopping. It just so happens that the farm I live on is the last, that's the line. So this house is gonna get hooked up, this house is not. So is there like I'm thinking, okay, maybe that's okay, because maybe we're gonna pick up the addresses that are not served under that deal, but we still have to run down the road.
yes. And that
So,
is.
I mean,
That is part of what the grant's paying for is to get from that point to the other point to serve that person at the other end.
so there's a lot of waste.
Yes, we're dealing with grants and there is waste that will be involved with that, unfortunately. And that's part of why broadband the way it is today is, you got your pockets of density. Yeah, they traveled through a lot of rural area and never served one person. Because it wasn't feasible. So it's really difficult to eliminate all that waste. And there will be some.
So would that change our strategy in that, yeah, we're gonna run down this road, but we're only gonna start doing drops or hooking people up that don't currently have an option. We're gonna not do drops on these other houses that are being served.
So if we run past a house, other than if it's an SEI fiber or SEI data customer, because we will not take their customers from them, and there is some in our territory. But any other provider, we will give access to or be able to provide access if we run by their home. Now, there might be some high density areas that we don't have to go through.
And we could route it and just skip
We can
that
go
part.
around and if they're already served,
And that wouldn't affect your grant.
no, it would not affect the grant. But you may also look at it from a business decision and say that high density of 50 people.
Yeah.
It might be wise to run that half mile and pick up 25 of those people from a business decision. So those will all be business decisions. The end goal, and I think this is what we all started with, was to have every address have access to fiber internet.
Right.
And that's our end game with this.
And go back to your comment you made just a minute ago about SEI and SEI data. We will not do what?
So SEI Data, we're partnering with,
Right.
and SEI Fiber, SEI Data is partnered with. There is some addresses that they currently serve today with fiber. We will not overbuild that.
So in my area where it's SEI and Airwaves Network, we're not going to serve that area or?
Do they have service today from SEI?
They're doing it now.
That's different. That's not SCI. That's, it's Airwave.
Well, it's Airwaves SEI is what I was told that it was.
They're not a joint venture. As long as it's not being done as a,
SEI signs in the yards. My neighbor has one right across the road from me. There's one at the corner of where I live.
I have some address data from them. I'd have to look at what they've provided me and what is
Because
served today.
Jason's point, there's a lot of boring activity down around me as well, and I keep getting questions about it. And I keep trying to say, be patient, be patient.
and so the tough part is, and Sam and I are going to put together some, as a part of this marketing plan, we're going to put together some stuff for you guys also, so that you know what to say and things like that. But you got to remember, when it comes down to these grants, they're paying, we got paid 50 cents a dollar to serve these addresses, right? Certain level addresses, and we got to get to these addresses, and we have to serve them as part of these requirements that are coming through. So possibly some of these that Jason's talking about, that you're talking about, are they going to serve the ones down the road? Probably will, but we still may have to serve them as far as, we don't know yet because we haven't seen the address list other than what we originally were awarded. So it just kind of makes it tough. And then who knows what's going to be on you would hope that the addresses that we're going to serve aren't in the beat addresses.
And how are we gonna know? Hey, these first 4 houses on this road already have, so we're gonna skip this because there's nobody else down there, and we're gonna go on to the next one. How are we gonna know? You can ask them. I don't know.
There's data out there that, when they're putting together these maps of where the served addresses are not.
Even with,
It's not 100% accurate, but we'll have access to some data that will tell us whether that house should be served with fiber or not. And when we're out there doing the engineering work, we'll be able to tell if there's fiber in the area, to know whether we need to serve it.
So it's kind of the IBO's job to update the maps according to what services are provided. Are they going to be perfect? No.
well, I guess somebody would need to know. It's all being bored, so, you can't look, you're not gonna look up and see it.
Yeah, there's nothing.
So there has to be board someplace, yes.
Well, they're going to want to say they serve that area, so somebody doesn't get grant funding to go serve it on top of them.
So they're going to submit.
So did they get grant funding for this work that they're doing now, you think?
Not off of NLC 4 necessarily, but there is other grants out there, and I can't speak to all of them. I know Great Plains did have a few pockets of grants.
Brent Linville told me he got some grant money. Well,
There is some,
small pocket.
yeah, there's,
Big dollars, but it was.
So they probably got grants.
I'm saying,
Built into it.
go.
Well, and I understand our hesitancy on the marketing side, but as soon as.
Oh, yeah. We need to get it out there.
Yeah. Because as we were discussing earlier, my concern becomes, and obviously our cost is going to be driven by grant money being awarded to us, but I don't know if people will switch if they're going from here to here, cost wise. If they're going from here to here, they will. But if they've got good service and they think it's a good value, if they're going to save minimal amounts of dollar, I don't know if they'll.
No, we hear you.
and it's a different market than what our electric business has ever been in. We've never had competitive.
Competitive, sure.
So it's something that we have
Which is
to,
good.
deal with. And it is a fear of ours too, that we, lose a few more customers because they've gone through the area. But overall, I think our service and our reliability and our electric service on top of that, I think we can win back a lot of those customers.
I'm just thankful you guaranteed me the grant money we're going to get. So.
But I think the major takeaway here, though, for that specific thing is we are working on a marketing.
Well, and we need to be prudent. I mean, I'm not suggesting we shouldn't, but yes, there's a lot, Jason and I were discussing before, there's a lot of activity down around me as well.
And in 4 to 5 months, there'll be a lot of activity above from us.
So is that your time frame?
Well, I'm waiting on this grant and then
But if you got the grant requirements and you say, yep, we're gonna accept it, and you got your contractor lined up,
So kind of a time frame of that, once we truly accept the grant, you're probably looking 3 to 5 months engineering. And then you're starting to build, and the build is less than 2 years for that area.
That's how many customers potentially?
The grant is for like 580.
Okay, 520.
We're passing about 1,600 addresses.
Anything else for Sam?
Thank you, sir.
Thanks for the update. Okay, we're gonna wrap up this deal update.
All right, a couple projects I wanted to update everybody on. Our safety improvement plan, we have completed. So we did all the Power of the Past, kind of finished up the commitments we made on the, geez, now I can't even think of, line demo. And then Jeff is still working on completing I think we got 5 of the 6 crew audits completed. So that's moving on. Pole replacements, just to make you aware, if you see a truck that says Kent, so we were done with the contract that we had from our old contract. The actual contract from our old contractor was up and they weren't getting the poles done. And so Johnny has interviewed a bunch of companies and we brought in a company called Kent. So Kent is now working and has committed to finishing our 3-phase poles by the end of the year. And then our crews are on track to finish in the 100, I think it's roughly, it says 150, but I think it's roughly 160 single phase poles this year. So pole replacements are on track and looking good. RF meter feasibility. So the plan is we're going to bring that in next month. I'm going to try to get you guys some information coming out prior to next month, but you'll see the big pitch for next month. Again, that's really a risk mitigation due to the equipment that we have to purchase to put into the substations is getting very, very old. They're out a 1.5-year timeframe and they're about $160,000, $70,000 a piece. And so it's a risk mitigation plus, anyway, I'm not going to spoil alert. It's coming next month. As far as the organizational chart, I did update your iPads on your dashboards if you go out there. So we've got everything filled. Sam is working on doing interviews right now for the IT technician. And so anyway, it's updated out there if you want to take a look at it.
That's the only outstanding.
There's a project management position, but you guys kind of know the plan on that, right? So we're going to hold on that.
Before we leave that, my question was about the poles. I didn't understand. You just said this company, Kent, is going to do the half that remain, or they're going to do half?
They're doing all of them. So our old contractor did not get started on the 3-phase.
Right. So this says that you're going to get half of the budget amount done with the new contract.
No, we got it at half the cost that was in the budget.
Or half of the budgeted amount.
Correct. Sorry, dollars.
All right. I thought you meant the quantity.
Cheaper.
Okay. Gotcha. Okay.
Which is you're going to see that. I mean, it's a contractor that's normally facing and they're hungry and they're going to come in pretty aggressive. So, but they've done an excellent job so far. So
you're going to have them all done and you're going to come in half price.
or that's 3-phase. That's that one. Good question. Anything else as far as projects from the project list? Now I'm going to go ahead and move to metrics. All right, so for, what is this, July? So July's temperature was about 1.4%. So again, we got another pretty hot month, about 1.4% warmer than our 5-year average. The cooling degree days ended up being 283 with a 5-year average of 277, so a little bit higher than that. Oh, so the cooling degree days was 283 compared to our 5-year average of 277. Purchased energy was up about 2.7% compared to our 5-year average. we were a little higher because of the cooling degree days. And then our demand was down about 1% from our 5-year average. So if you look at our sales to budget, we went from about 2.45 to 1.95, so lost a little ground as far as what our budget had. And then if you look up the makeup, residential dropped a little bit below budget, commercial, and again, it's to budget. Commercial still running above, industrials are still down, and our transmission still above budget. So kind of ups and downs there. From a reliability standpoint, again, a pretty quiet month. I think we ended, lost consumer hours were at 1,200 compared to a 5-year average of 4,000. And then the number of outages was 63 compared to 5-year average of 85. July had a bad year last year, so it's kind of dragging the numbers up. I always think this is kind of interesting to keep up to date. So these are year-to-date lost consumer hours. So where are all of our outages coming from? So vehicles and machineries continue to be the leading cause. And then you got essentially trees right underneath that with lightning and construction behind that. Any questions on any of the metrics or projects? Anybody? Pretty quiet month.
All right, thanks, Brad. Continue on with the financial update.
All right, first we have a balance sheet. There's not really a ton of activity this month. Nothing rose to the level of our 5% and $250,000 to where we make a note on it. In general, it was a fairly quiet month from the balance sheet standpoint. I don't really know that there's anything really that stuck out as major points to make. It was a relatively calm month in that regard. Next, we have our income statement. You can see down at the bottom, I made my notes on we are running ahead on our operating revenue and ahead on power costs, since we are ahead from as Brett said, we are over budget on our KWH sales of almost 4 million over budget. So we're running about $264,000 ahead on gross margin, because our revenue and power costs are both higher, but our revenue is higher than the power cost. Controllable expenses, they did catch quite a bit back up. The right of way, we got a lot of bills in the last month that brought down the negative amount there. It's still under budget year to date, but they've caught a bunch of that back up. And then some of that is labor and benefits, and that will be under, I believe, for the remainder of the year, just with all the open positions we had earlier this year.
Do you have any idea, do you have a field map for how much under? Because that was going to be my question. I see the notice we lost some of the cushion we had.
If you look at note C there, it tells you where we are as of the end of July. The right of way is under budget 213 year to date, and labor and benefits were under about 166. So that's the bulk of it right there. The under controls. And then at the bottom, there's D, which has been the note for the bad debt change in accounting. That'll continue throughout the year. Did that answer your question, Dale?
Well, I guess I'm trying to, we lost, part of the cushion went away in July. Are we expecting that trend to continue for the balance of the year?
Yeah, I mean, we expect to spend our entire right away budget. It's a matter of
controllable expenses overall.
I think we'll be under when it comes to labor and benefits with all the openings we had earlier in the year to date. Most of the other ones are a timing issue.
Should be.
Some are going to be high, some are going to be low. I mean, it's at the end, they're all going to wash out fairly close. I mean, a few things pop over, a few things pop under.
That's what I wanted. That's fine.
But I do anticipate us being under for the year, just because the labor and benefits,
Because of the open.
it's going to stay under.
Not to the degree we are now.
No.
No, it'll catch back. Things are catching back up.
July is more of the trend going forward. Okay.
Yes, I think that'd be a very good way of putting it. Any other questions then on the income statement of operations? Next, we have cash flow. Our cash for the month increase of 182. In general, in August, we borrowed and paid back. That'll be something I talk about later. We did borrow money in August and we did pay it back on our line of credit. In general, money came in, money came out. There's really nothing outside of that sticks out from a cash flow statement for the month of July. It's like the balance sheet. There was really nothing that screams, hey, look at me. So. Plant, we're continuing to make progress on that stuff. As Brett said, we have the contractors. I've seen them come in and out every day this week. They're definitely making progress. I would imagine come August, September, we will see a huge jump in the pole replacements because they're moving along. So I would fully anticipate a large increase in that in the next 2 months. But I don't think it'll be a huge jump in August just because they're just kind of started. I don't know exactly. They haven't given us any invoices yet. So, I mean, they may be a late biller and maybe a quick biller. I don't know how they're going to be yet. Any questions on plant?
Are we good? We'll catch up with you a little bit later too, then you're gonna have a couple more things, right?
Yep.
All right, we'll go on to cost of service, new business. We'll start out with, the cost of service.
So Matt and I kind of worked this together. You can kind of see our proposal here if you read through this. I wanted to start with the scope of work, just so everybody kind of understands what we're going to be asking to be done. So remember, this is going to the idea is we go ahead and bid this out, we lock in who we're going to go with, and do our kind of training towards the end of this year, because we're going to know in late November from Hoosier as far as where that's going to land. So then we would kick this off January, February of next year. And so I want to make sure that we've communicated what the scope of work is going to be. So I'm going to go through each one. So first one is assess the revenue requirements. That's obviously part of any cost of service study. 2 is to analyze the costs in light of the new Hoosier rates, which will be effective April 1st of 2026. Examine the impact of creating a 4-part rate for learning purposes. So what that means is we talked about doing it last time and we never really did it, but have them create a 4-part rate and maybe get some employees and maybe some directors to not put you on it, as kind of like a dummy bill. Just so we can see kind of the effects of it. So we thought, let's go ahead and have them build it. Not saying that's the direction we want to go, but at least having build it and we could actually test it like a pilot. 4 is to review the current time of use rates and to recommend additional of a super off-peak rate for EV charging. So the idea there is we've got one person on time of use right now. So obviously it's not sending the right price signal. So we're going to want to take a look at that according to our newest cost of service. And then we're suggesting to go ahead while we're doing this and build this super off-peak rate, which will send a price signal to EV folks to charge off super off-peak, right? So in the middle of the night.
And really anybody for that matter. If you want to do your 100 2 in the morning prior to it.
Yeah, so that number 4, the idea is that we'll have one time of use rate. Anybody can go on it. Obviously, if you're an EV owner, you're going to want to go on it. But anybody could, if you decide you want to get up at 3 in the morning and wash your clothes, well, you can do that. Five, we haven't looked at security and streetlights in a while. The cost of LEDs is way higher than what the old ones were, but they last a lot longer. So we felt like it's time to look at that. Review solar rates. I think that's just kind of always on there. Reset the tracker. That's always on there. We're going to want to bring up anything from the tracker to zero it out. That's what users basically doing with their rates.
What if we don't zero it?
If user doesn't zero it, then we wouldn't. It would just flow through like it normally would
Because that's been discussed too.
at user.
What, that they might not see?
Well,
All the way to zero.
maybe not take it all the way to zero. It's just an idea. I mean, some folks talked about, and I didn't know. I mean, if, like for us, if we zeroed the tracker, regardless of what we did, that's saying that we think that these inflationary costs for all these variable production expenses are here to stay. That's what that means if we take the zero. So what if some of this stuff does come back? Do we still want to have some ability for that to move? Or do you want to get into a negative tracker? Maybe a negative tracker is not the end of the world either. We had that for several years. I don't know, it's just a theory, because you're gonna have to make, if you take it all the tracker, you're gonna have to make that up somewhere. It's gonna affect your base rate. It could.
My suggestion is going to be whatever, when I mean zero, I mean do whatever a user does. So if there's,
By the time you do this work, we're gonna,
well, no,
we should.
absolutely. Absolutely. Good question though. Consider separating single phase. So this is something that I'm not real sure how much this is going to cost us to do it and if we have the actual information to be able to do this effectively. But I will tell you, I think this is something that we've talked about for years and years and years. And I think it's something that we need to take serious and take a look at this. And here's why I mean that. We have a lot of people that have a big transformer that may not necessarily be a residential person, right? Yet they're on single phase. So you're creating subsidies in the single phase rate that I think you could eliminate some of those subsidies by creating two rates. So you would have a true residential single phase rate and a true general service single phase rate, which would allow the cost to be better appropriated. I don't know what that means as far as like what the rate increases would require to get you to fairness on that. All I'm saying here is I think we should take a look at what's it take to do something like that, and what data do they need, and then what would be the impact if we would want to do that. Does that make sense? Because if you look at all
It is
these,
very common in a lot of it.
You just said that you got a general purpose one and then you got a residential. So wait a minute, what's the difference between residential and a general purpose?
so here's the difference. Let's say you are a grain bin. You have a single phase, very large transformer that has a very big load. The cost to serve that member compared to Steve's house is way different. Way different. And so what we're doing by putting those all together is we're creating what they call cross.
How many grain
Subsidization.
farmers out there or any farmers out there have grain systems, home buildings, any kind of buildings out there that are hooked to with the house? 1 meter.
Yeah, there are some of those.
Oh, zillions of them.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree.
So what you're doing is you're saying, okay, we're gonna put a meter on the house, we'll have the rate on the grain. Grain and milk, right?
No.
No, it's,
Don't know that the rate would be more. That's
It's-
to find out.
It's just kind of,
Yeah, I'm not suggesting we create this rate. What I'm suggesting is we look at it and see
What the numbers are.
what the numbers are. We may find out it doesn't do anything.
most of the co-ops around us have a separate general service rate if it's not a house. They have a house and anything on your house is one rate. So, but as to your point, if you have a house, grain bins, your whole farm, that's going to be residential with your house. It's if you have, it's the New Point Berry farm where I got a transformer. It's out there hanging next to the interstate and I run power 4 months of the year and the rest of the year it's pretty well nothing.
He's getting subsidized by everyone.
Yes, so this will not be good for me.
Well,
I'm glad you brought yours up
I'm
for
just trying to figure out when you said something general purpose and residential.
It's my little shack that's running lots of power.
But no, we would never make someone change, like, this would not create meter changes or nothing.
That cutoff is transformer size.
Exactly. Yeah. The point is, and we may find out that there ain't a big enough difference to make a change. And that
And
might,
we may not be able to identify every single one of them either. I mean,
that's the other problem.
that's the other thing is, I mean, how do you know my, depending on what name it is, you might not know my berry shed is by itself.
That's what I fear is that the data he's gonna need to be able to do this.
Is that may not be able to give. This is just, hey, something to look at.
But if you look at the KRTAs, traditionally Decatur County REMC, when it comes to the amount of KWH per resident, ours is very, 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 very high. It's 1,200 KWH. Well, why is that? It's because you got single phase hotels that are on the same rate. Well, single phase hotel or single phase gas station is not the same load as a residential.
Getting averaged out.
It's all getting averaged out. Now, again, we may see that Carl might be right. There may be very few of these and it ain't worth touching.
But the information could be very revealing. It's going to be revealing one way or the other.
Correct. It's either going to tell us we don't need to do anything and we're good to go,
Or we should.
and we're brilliant, or
It's worth further investigation.
And you have not in past years have not done that with the cost of service study, review that. So it's just something new to request,
absolutely.
just a request.
Just to realize.
Just to look at it. Yeah.
And Suzanne, we may not have the appropriate data to even look at it in our system. In other words, we may not know what variable. It's under a single phase rate, so we got to figure out exactly what he needs. This was something that we talked about the last cost of service study, but we had so much other stuff going on, we didn't do it. But again, we have no idea if we would even recommend doing anything. It's alarming that our KWH per resident is very, very high. And I think it's because you have a bunch of bigger folks in there that are averaging and higher, which I don't know what the impact is until we look at it.
It might just be that people have more stuff they use power for here.
Yeah. And we do have a higher saturation of electric
Yeah.
heat.
That do. Might have 4 refrigerators instead of 2.
Verify whether proposed rates support the cost in line. So they want you to do this every time you do it. Just to make sure our line extension. So the $1,800 is still on par, essentially is what that means. Analyze the accounts with large demands that may not operate year round, but still require significant transformer capacity. So this is specifically looking at, so for instance, there are facilities that have fire systems, right? So they run them once a year. It's a huge load once a year. And so the idea was to look at that to see, is there anything that needs to be done in that area? When you think about this, you're starting to think back to like 3-part rate, 4-part rate, just different options. Is there a different way to handle those things? To still recover the same amount, but charge it differently. It's just a different way to look at the bill. Again, not saying we want to do anything there. It's just looking at different options. Recommend changes to standardize the minimum bill theory across rate classes. So the minimum bill theories are a little bit different, whether you're single phase, 3-phase, or industrial. So that is just, let's try to standardize it essentially. Evaluate whether power factor penalties, this is something you always want to do, right? So we have power factor penalties. Are they still sending the appropriate price signals according to what we have to pay and things like that? And then obviously you land on designing the rates. So our project goals, and we can change these if you want, but ensure compliance with the IURC standards. Again, just because we're not jurisdicted under the IURC, we still follow the same rules as anyone else does. We just don't have to do it in front of the regulatory body. Balance the need of the cooperative with the impact on the members. Maintain non-discretionary, fair, and equitable practices. So then our final recommendation is you guys ask us to go get a quote from these two. The reason we Matt and I talked about this for a while and we could go get other quotes, but we know what they're going to end up being. And I think we're just wasting their time. These are going to be the two that Noah's, the two that are going to be way closer to what we're normally paying for a cost of service study. But then we go ahead and get this information, get these two to quote the project, and then bring that back to you guys and decide on who you want to go with.
I think that's a good approach.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
So if we would do a meter project, is that gonna go into rate base or how's that gonna be handled? That would go in the rate base, right?
No, because our test period is going to be 2024. We may want to prorate.
I'm just saying, if we would decide that we're gonna replace the meters, is that gonna be covered in this?
We can make adjustments to the
Per
pro
rate.
forma, knowing that, hey, this is gonna change. That this project's gonna cost X dollars. We need to know that, we know that we're gonna need to collect X dollars to cover this. over the
So
next.
would we have that information? Probably not. There's no way. We wouldn't have that information before we decided to do the meter project or not. Like how that could affect.
There's no way. You mean have the understanding of how it impacts rates?
Because we're not gonna do the meter project and borrow money to do that or some general construction work plan. That's gonna go right in rate base, which is directly gonna affect what we've got to collect from that class. That's where the money's gonna come. We're not gonna borrow it on the construction work plan. We're gonna get it directly from the ratepayers.
I mean, we can always borrow it from, we can borrow it from CFC or.
But if it's going in rate base, then it's gonna be part of the revenue requirement, for sure.
Yes and no.
Yes, they won't build in a specific project into rate.
But it's gonna go in the rate base.
Yeah, but it's gonna be a very depreciated, I mean, we would need to get them to explain this, but if it cost us $2 million, they're not gonna drop $2 million into our revenue requirement. No, that's not how
It's gonna be prorated over time,
correct.
Yeah.
over the life of the asset.
They're gonna do that anyway because of the,
Right, but at the end of the day, it's coming from the ratepayer.
absolutely.
That's my point.
Yes.
So I would like to know what net impact is of that decision. Like, because we're gonna do this cost of service and we're gonna do this rate adjustment possibly, like, is that, here's the question. Is that impactful to a ratepayer?
So why couldn't we just go back to the last cost of service study and throw that in there? And I mean, we should be able to back of the nap.
That would be some information that I would want to know before I decided, yes, let's spend $2 million on meters or no.
That's fair. I think we could go back and back of the napkin our last study, because we're not gonna have this one.
Because, all right, what's the, if we did zero the tracker, are we gonna be able to? No one knows the answer to that. I don't want to add unnecessary upward pressure to base rates based on a new meter.
Absolutely. Yep.
That's just my opinion.
No, I agree. But I think we could get you very, very close to what you're looking for. It won't be with the updated brand new cost of service study, but it'd be
No,
damn close.
I don't think that's what we need to know. We need to know, hey, everyone's gonna pay $5 a month or
Yeah.
50, I don't know.
We can get rough idea, I would say, for what you're asking. I mean, with the meters, it's also gonna come down to the cost up front versus as they fail, the amount of them that you're gonna have to replace anyway too. So there's gonna be a cost there. No matter how we slice it, it does get baked into the rates based off of our fixed assets.
So is everyone good though with them reaching out to these two groups to get an estimate and coming back to us by another couple of months with?
The test year is gonna be 23.
24, it'll be this year.
But we're gonna have to pro forma Because we've got labor and stuff in there that's not gonna be.
You're asking for this work to be completed by when?
The end of 25.
Yeah. We would want whatever we want to do to be in effect April 1st of 26, same as you.
So we have,
And you have to give several months notice.
So could they wait and not, I mean, could they wait till the test year's completed to start the work?
No,
I mean,
they won't start this until probably end of January, February.
well, that's what I'm saying. We'll have all the 24 data by then, so why do we have to make adjustments? Why can't they use actuals?
They will use the actual.
Well, no, we'll pro forma because they're not going to have the actuals for Hoosier. Hoosier's new rate. So you can't use actual power costs from the testers.
Understand that, but I mean, if they're gonna use our data from 2024, RMC's data,
Correct.
that's the test year.
Absolutely.
They can wait until 2024 is complete and then use
Yes.
actual numbers.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
You said something about they were gonna have to estimate some part of 24, but they won't.
No, they
No,
won't.
no.
There'll be estimates based off things that, if we know something has changed
Sure.
based off of,
But
in mid 25, say we know X changed from 24.
if you're not asking for this to be
Yeah.
completed until the end of 25, he's not gonna start until January, February.
You'll have
all actions.
Yes, we'll have all actions, yes.
That was my question.
Yep.
I would never want to do it on a test year. You don't have 100% actuals.
No, this is to get them to tell us more or less what they're gonna charge, and then we'll start next year, once we have all the final.
In all likelihood, it'll end up probably being the end of Q1.
Yeah, I don't anticipate any. I mean, we really won't probably get lots of stuff till the middle of next year, be my guess.
But we'll want to finish it probably be by the end of Q3 because we got to give time to the members if we do, even if we're doing a revenue neutral change. In other words, we're not asking for more money. We're just switching buckets. We still have to let folks know.
all right, so we'll
Fair enough.
wait to hear from you guys and make our decision. Next item is the donated capital discussion.
So we have a certain amount of checks every year that we are issued for patronage that don't ever get cashed. Either the people have passed away with no heirs, they moved away and they didn't tell us where they moved to. In general, there are people who have disappeared.
Is there a time frame to how far back they can go? In other words, if I noticed or remembered a name from 3 years ago, can somebody come forward and say, can I get that from 3 years?
I believe you have 2 years.
You have 2 years.
2 years.
So now granted, you could go going forward.
Sure, I understand.
But in general, so I talked to our auditor about this. His recommendation was more or less to leave this in the donated capital bucket and let it grow. It's getting to be a bigger number, and he said to let it get as big as it's gonna get effectively. Now, at any time, if the board would so desire to reallocate that, they could, but in general, his advice was not to do that.
So this was brought up, you guys remember years ago, the board decided, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, the board decided instead of reallocating capital credits that aren't cashed, that we were going to actually put it into permanent equity, right? So it's just a balance sheet thing.
Except it's not permanent equity.
Except for it's not
Donated.
the term is now donated capital. So we were a little worried that it was it grew $71,000 last year, right? So it's sitting at 315,
Yeah, it's
17,000 right now. So that doesn't get reallocated to the members. It just becomes.
If we keep doing capital credits the way we are, it'll be $1 million within 5 or 6 years.
So we're just gonna see that reflected on the balance sheet only.
Yeah, it's
Correct.
Yeah. It's just gonna hang out there. More or less from what Earl said, it'll hang out there until forever, or the co-op dissolves, or the board decides to reallocate it, or.
So it has to be allocated, but it's just not scheduled to ever retire.
Well, it's not allocated unless board decides to allocate. It was already allocated.
It's just,
That's what I mean.
it's, isn't it really just changing the terminology? of
Absolutely.
It's very cosmetic.
It is. We just wanted you to be aware of this.
I appreciate that. I understand. And I think it's more descriptive.
So that was his thing, was
Sorry?
not call it permanent.
Yeah, and I think it's more descriptive of what it is.
Yes,
And I think that's the point. But it's,
because he said technically if the RAMC were to wrap up business at some point in the future, then you would hand it back. Because the RAMC does not have permanent equity, then it would be reallocated.
You'd have to.
So that's why he said it's not permanent equity.
You reallocate it to the dead members or whoever like that too, or it would go to the members of
If-
that? See, that's what I'm trying to figure out.
If the board chose to reallocate it, it would be based off, it would come into current years and then get reallocated out amongst everybody.
Among the members.
So he'd take it from the balance sheet over to our income statement. It
Yeah.
would get allocated as a margin in the current year to whoever's
Yes,
taking.
and then it'd go back like out over 30 years.
If we send out a couple credits every year or something like that, and every year you got John Doe over here and he keeps cashing it,
Yep.
then you figure, hey, John Doe's gone.
This is what we're talking about.
Yeah, and so
Yeah.
you can't do nothing with that stuff right now.
It just kind of hangs there until more or less effectively it's donated for till so long as the RAMC exists. I mean, we're retiring stuff from 30 years ago right now. And there is a great many of those people that are long since gone. And I mean, it's people who have no heirs. It's people who were here for 4 years and they left and they now live in who knows where, Florida or Texas or Arizona or California or somewhere else. And they've moved on and they never gave us a forwarding address. And
So you register that like on the Indian unclaimed?
no, we are not required to do that. So what we do is we print it in the magazine and we have lists and I mean, we try to call people. I mean, the girls make a very concerted effort to get people their money. I mean, you have to drop off the face of the earth or you're 6 feet under, probably not getting contacted.
so just to be clear, 100% of the capital credit payments that have fallen into this circumstance are now going to be classified as donated.
Yes,
And we've done that now for
several years.
3 years.
There is no permanent equity.
It never was called that on the books anyway, but that was the term that was.
Did you say that Earl said it wasn't really advised to reallocate it and pay it out at some point?
He did not recommend that.
You could do a scholarship, you could do things like that if it got big. But you got to come up with the cash.
Yeah, it's not real money.
There's not real money sitting there.
It's a real liability.
Yeah, it is.
That's it is.
It's a real liability. But fundamentally, everything we have is a liability.
Correct.
Yes. It's just a liability that as long as you leave it there, you don't have to come up with cash to pay. It's the best kind of liability. It's when you don't have to pay back.
Unless you dissolve.
Unless you dissolve. Those of us who will be members for the remainder of our lives, it's a good deal.
So I don't think we need any formal
No,
motion.
I think that was more of a,
You okay?
Kind of information.
yeah, unless you guys choose to reallocate it, which Earl highly recommended against, so.
That's why I asked that first question, because you wouldn't want to do the last 2 years then, based upon what you said.
Correct.
Well, whatever,
Yeah.
All right, I think the next item is, there's 3 policy reviews, and I think Brett, if you go ahead and go over those.
Yep. So the first policy and the second policy, so the drug-free workplace and the employee driver. So there has been a lot of law changes from an employment law standpoint. So we had these reviewed. And so while we're reviewing those, we tried to clean them up essentially, right? So we took a bunch of stuff from the the employee drivers that really applied to drug use and stuff like that, right? So we took a bunch of stuff out of 1018, put it into 1017, and deleted off 1018. And then the rest of this is really cleanup, right? So I tried to leave the comments on here, so when legal reviewed it, they put a comment out there. I tried to leave all that out there so you could see why it was being done. But I don't think fundamentally there's any.
This is a bigger issue with the Colorados. Honestly. In Indiana, we don't smoke and drive.
So again, there's a bunch of stuff from 1018 that get dropped into 1017. That's all really just cleanup. I don't think there's really anything that's like change in practice or anything like that that we actually do. More or less just lining up with the laws.
Well, you did have the word conviction. I believe you can see as opposed to just leaving the scene.
Correct.
They were actually convicted, but
Yeah, I mean, there was a few nuances like that.
otherwise you just kind of moved.
Move stuff around and then legal.
Is RZ someone?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, it's Robin Zubin. It's
From
a lady that works with Harvard. Is that someone?
He's trying to figure it out.
Now, does the union do the scenes?
Yes, they have seen this.
Oh, JLG.
Huh?
So I think we can maybe approve all three of these at the same time. And since we just talked about 17 and 18, does anybody have any specific questions on those based upon what we're going through?
I just have a question on 17. Section G where it talks about if a subsequent last two sentences, paragraph, bullet point G. If a subsequent test less than 4 years after the leave of absence yields a positive detection, the employee shall be discharged immediately. 4 years after a leave is taken, it shall not be used as a basis for future discharge. Leave of absence, I think I read was 30 days. I believe it's in there somewhere. Does that calendar start at the beginning of that 30 days or at the end of that 30 days would be my only question. Because when you say 4 years after a leave of absence, is it 4 years after the beginning of the leave of absence or 4 years after the end of the leave of absence? Because it can make a difference of a month.
Yeah, I believe it's at the same week. In other words, it'd be at the start.
Okay.
I'm almost positive. Yeah. And I don't think this wasn't changed. It was just brought over from the other. But no, we could leave this one out. I can confirm that.
I just want to, I'm fine. I mean, if legals looked at it and
Any other comments about 17 or 18? Brett can elaborate on 14 if not. We'll talk through 14.
By the way, a lot of the stuff that's written in here is like DOT requirement stuff. So like when you ask like, how'd you come up with 0.04 or all that? It's all taken from the DOT. Okay, so for 1014, we also had this one reviewed. It came up for review. So I'll kind of go through this to see if they're, oh yeah, so part A, we just wanted to make sure that we call out the collective bargaining agreement should notify. Part B. So part A, I think, I'm looking. Part A is really the change. All this other stuff is, you know. So part A says today, shall notify current employees of all vacancies or newly created positions. The RMC shall publicize the positions and provide a summary of position descriptions and position specification. Qualified employees may also apply for the position. So for the union, we are required per the contract to post any newly created positions. It's baked into the contract. So we put that verbiage in here that, hey, we're going to follow whatever's in the bargaining unit contract. For current employees today, that is general practice, that if we create a new position, no matter why we create it, that we're going to post it internally. What I'm asking for here is that requirement. And the reason is because of some of the changes that we've done to the organizational structure. There's no reason to put somebody into the pipeline when you already know what you're doing in that position. In other words, you created a position because of that person's talents, right? And so what I'm trying to do here is not every position is going to be open to everyone at every point in time. I don't want to have to post a position when I already know there's a qualified candidate and there's not another qualified candidate. Now, in most cases, we will, right? Probably 80% of the positions that we create, we will post internally. But there are some, i.e. the technology, the IT technologists, there's no one that's qualified to do that internally, right? That's not a very good example. That's what I'm changing here is I'm trying to say that we are not required to post newly created positions. You have to for the union, but for everyone else, we would not for office positions. That's really the major change of all this. Everything else is just really legals, updates, according to state laws, but just clean up.
And so legal looked at this as well.
Absolutely. That's what most of these do.
I'll consider a motion to approve all three of them at this time.
I'll make that motion.
Yep. I made the motion, so, okay. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, the same. Okay, that's unanimously. All right, the next item takes us to the bylaw red lines. I know that last month's meeting, you went through the majority of this and would talk through it on changes. And I believe legal went ahead and modified or made their modifications based upon our request, basically. I'm not sure the best way to approach it. I guess it's just going either page by page or section by section to get through this, unless somebody has another idea. I'm hoping everybody looked at this closely, but we can probably get through it pretty quick if I just say, we're okay with section 1.02, and just move on. You guys good with that? Okay, anybody have anything for section 102 that they didn't agree with? If I see any heads nodding, I'll take you up on it. If I don't, I'll go on.
I'll try to show them as we go too.
Okay, that's good. That's good as well. Other than the date changes, bottom of the page. Then we're back. I think we're ready for page 6, Article 3, meetings of members. Was there anything before that?
Last
90 days versus 120 days was on page 2, but that was the only thing.
Sorry.
That's
See,
okay.
I missed that. Oh, yeah. Were you good? Was everybody good with that? Okay. So now we're ready for page 6, I guess.
Section 3.01. The final sentence. Is that correct or is that supposed to be different worded there?
I asked the same question.
Work
Yeah, no, that's supposed to be how it is.
shall not work before
sure. Good.
I asked, Crystal asked,
Okay.
said, no, it's legal jargon.
Okay.
I asked the same question, so Crystal. Yeah, so this was this was just the cleanup that we kind of talked about.
Everybody go with that? Can we go on? Let's go to special meetings. The way I perceive it, I remember you guys talking about it last month, I was virtual.
With that comment,
The only,
Robert's part is with that comment, you could make the argument. He goes, I talked to my dad and I don't think the intent was ever that the chairperson could call a special meeting of the members. Right? But with that comment in there, you can make the argument that the chairman could call on his own a special. Now, this isn't a special meeting of the board members. This is a special meeting of the members.
right?
And so he talked to Don about it and Don said, no, that was always intended on being the board needs to make that decision. So I had him go ahead and write it up like that. So now it's clear that you guys have to do a resolution as a board.
Or 10% of the membership.
Or 10% of the membership, one or two. Which is, I assume, how we would do it anyway, but why not go ahead and clean it up?
Okay, then I'm good with that.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Three oh three was just really a cleanup to allow the way that we do things today with the electronics. If really anything there.
Yeah, I think unless anybody has any questions there, I think we're good. Voting, section 305.
Yeah, again, it's just trying to clean it up.
Let's go to section 307.
So 307 isn't necessarily getting rid of this committee, although it's getting rid of the wording. So basically what you're doing is today, you guys already make the decision as a board on how you're going to conduct a fair and transparent election, right? That's what you've been doing. And then it just basically says those who aren't up for election will make calls basically on the election, right? And then again, so that's what the B basically is. And then for the election contestants, again, it's just taking out the credential, saying it's a committee. It's basically the board of directors that are not up for election.
In essence, it's the same group of people that would have done it under the old verbiage, right?
Correct.
But it's just worded differently, that it's like they're.
The only difference that he did mention to me though, is I think the way he has it worded is, so let's say Suzanne and Carl are up for election. Suzanne's is not contested, but Carl's is. Suzanne would be able to be as a part of that decision, right? Whatever decision that those folks need to make. So that is a change that he did make. In other words, everyone can vote on a contested election except for whoever's being contested.
Only that, the ones who are not up for reelection obviously are going to vote. But in your example, Suzanne would be included because she's not in a contested
Correct.
election.
Even though she was up for election,
Therefore, she's already
not contested.
already been.
That was really the big change here, I guess.
So that's 3.07.
Yes.
The 307, the last sentence. So isn't that like a nominating committee function?
Qualification, are you talking about the qualifications of a candidate and rig?
Yeah. Litany of petitions. I know it says it was in there before, like, I don't know. Is that something we do?
I mean, yeah, I think if there's a petition that comes up and we check it and it's not for some reason valid, we would bring it to the board. I think that's what that's saying, right?
Maybe I'll bring it right to the next.
I think the petitions for nominations, what is throwing me off too.
And it was on there before.
Yeah, he never-
Redline Park was scratched out before. I'm wondering, it seems like we got double duty going on here. I thought that was a nominating committee,
So,
but we can't validate someone's signature anyway, because we don't have access to the information. Someone here has to do that.
We don't validate whether they're members or not.
Correct.
Yeah. Like, so what are we really, I guess we would validate, yep, it was turned in on time.
I really don't know what you would do or how, what, I mean, we're going to tell you if there's enough signatures. We're going to tell you if they're members or not, or on the list, because that's what Jeannie does.
You guys have, yeah, that's not us. I don't know, maybe it's.
so to your point, should we consider taking that out? Is that what you're wanting? Because we can,
Well, and maybe we should read through the nominating committee part.
I don't think it's in theirs. I don't think they have the validity of a petition.
If it's not, then I'm okay with it being where it is, but if it's in their part, then
we may have to,
I'm almost positive it's not in theirs. Three oh six, is it in there? I didn't think it was. It's right above that. Yeah, they're not validating petitions. So it does need to stay in there. Or they're not making a ruling. I don't know what you rule on. I mean, they either do or don't meet the requirements. But
Signatures don't.
yeah, but maybe the idea is if we find that that's the case, since it's an election, you're not going to want us making that ruling. That needs to go to the board. That's why it's in.
okay. I was misunderstood. Okay.
Well, it's really.
Suzanne, how about you? Are you okay with that?
Yes, no.
I mean, it's the same as it was before. I was just thinking more of nominating committee.
Okay.
All right, election contestant, I think we already talked about that.
I want to clarify that. So as I read that, a contested election an election can only be contested by the candidate. Is that correct?
Candidate who is contesting the election or by any member.
But it says it's not an election,
If somebody's not contested, they can.
that is not an election. That's more procedural in my mind. That's the clarity I'm looking for. So going back to your scenario, well, Jason and I run against Jason, whatever, he wins. I have to say I want to contest the election. No one else can say it on my behalf.
Correct. That's what this says.
Because that's not what occurred.
Correct. That's
A couple of years ago.
Yes,
that is what Robert is saying.
that's what I wanted to make sure.
That's what he told me. A candidate who is contesting the election.
Must be part of the contesting. Or any member.
Or by any member.
Well,
Or any
it
member.
further says by any member if he or she is contesting a voting matter that is not an election.
The way he means this is it has to be the candidate that's contesting.
That's the way
I know that's what.
Clarified by that, though. I don't.
You want me to have him reword that part then?
But what does this mean? If he or she is contesting a voting matter that is not an election.
What does that mean? Candidate who
Contesting a voting matter. is not an election.
I guess we could put out a vote to the membership. You could have
eligibility.
That's not really what that's.
but I mean, if the board of directors decided to put something out to have the membership vote on something to get, I'm just assuming there. if you guys made a decision to put on the, put a measure on the ballot effectively. Proposition 1.
Yeah, it would be number one.
Let's have him take a shot.
Well, because you're in the
Because you
section.
probably could do that if you wanted to know what everybody truly thought.
By definition, you're talking about elections.
I know he told me this one. I say we try to reword it.
I would appreciate it being words. It
Do
doesn't.
you agree, though, on his intention here, which is the only way you can contest an election is the person has to sign on,
Candidate.
candidate.
If you were a candidate in that election.
In other words, if Dale's running and he loses,
I lost to Jason. Steve can't contest it on my behalf without my approval.
Correct.
Sign.
that's what he's trying to say here.
I just think it's not very clear.
Yeah, no, I agree. Let's have him, on basis of what I know he meant or is trying to do with this one, do you agree with that? That's really the question.
Because that mitigates.
That was his whole point. He's like, we've already had this issue.
Period. Because the section says election content.
Exactly.
It doesn't have anything to do with any of the voting matters.
So just period after contesting the election.
Yeah.
Probably saw.
So we're gonna have that, we're gonna have that looked at. Let's go to the next paragraph if we're ready for it.
Yep.
Right after in line 3, says the committee. I think that should be the directors because that's what he references. We no longer reference that as a committee.
You're right. No. That needs to be changed.
It's referenced a couple times.
Yeah, and then in the last sentence. See that?
Okay. This one right here.
Yeah.
That needs to be going in here. You're right.
We go with that paragraph.
There's 2 of them, right?
There were 2 there. Then in the next paragraph, I'm going to bring up a question because I don't remember reviewing this 12 years ago, whatever. But I believe when it talks about a decision being made, shall require a majority of those present, but not less than 4 votes. I think there were 9 directors at the time, at least when this bylaw was. That makes sense. Every cycle, there were 3 directors that were being, or that the election was being held for. So you had 6 people that would have encompassed part of this committee, if you will, or the directors. I think that 4 was to represent a majority, super majority of them. Not in this case, it could be unanimous. It would have to, it could be unanimous because we'll have elections going forward of 2, 3, and 2, right? And so if you have 4 directors that would be part of this.
Well, no, you most likely, if you're only having 1. So if there's 2 that are going up for election and only 1 of them is being contested, you still have 6 members.
You do in that case, yeah, but since we even changed the.
Yeah, but you would still vote if the 3 of you were in an election that was contested, but only Brett's contested, only his was contested, you would still vote participating.
You still vote because you're not being contested. That's what he's saying here.
I see what.
And that was the point you made before with the Suzanne Carl
Correct. Same thing.
hypothetical.
And then you would say, well, what if we contested Brett's and
I
mine?
got you.
That you would vote on yours and you would vote on his.
Absolutely.
Then we can leave it at 4. I don't think that.
That was the thought process was, you're right. It was intended on being a super 2/3. Then when we talked the last time, well, that's going to be everybody. But then when we changed that up there, you're always going to have 6. You'd have to do 2 different votes. If there's 2 there.
Yeah, should have, yeah. Okay.
That would be
Because each vote would be independent.
pretty unlikely.
Very unlikely.
Okay.
By law.
Is everybody good with that section of the 2.808?
Go to 401.
Yeah.
That's just cleanup from made the change. Easy. Go down to 404. That's just cleaning up by first class mail. Planning committee should have, facility members should have complaints. Oh, that one here came up because we have a formal complaint process. It's kind of confusing as far as how this would work compared to, I mean, we have a formal, we didn't originally when these were wrote, but now we have a formal complaint process as a part of our bylaws. Actually, we have a form for it. The whole point is you really don't need this. The duplicate. 406 is just cleanup. I don't know why the districts, well, I do. I moved them up a page so they all showed up in red. Nothing's changing there. .407. Oh, 407 is the cleanup when it comes to what happens if you get a tie vote. So if you get a tie vote, the only way to really do it and give members notice to meet the notice requirements is you're gonna have to go back and redo the election, right? So that's how he wrote it. And then we were thinking, okay, well, what happens if you redo the election and it's a tie again? You just flip a coin. So that's where we wrote it.
No fire.
Rock, paper, scissors.
Rock, paper, scissors, we could do that too.
In the unlikely event that that would happen though, have we ever checked with SBS? What would their charges be to?
Well, it would depend on how many,
I mean,
yeah, it's expensive. It's very, you're gonna redo. Now, you guys could decide, you know, it's gotta be, so the way that he put it in here is it's gotta be substantially in the same manner, right? So you could kind of decide how that's gonna be. I mean, I would assume that you're gonna do it all three methods. It would be very expensive to redo it. You're only gonna redo it for,
right.
hopefully you'd only get
Well, right.
one tie ever. It's not like you're gonna have,
I'm gonna gamble that's not gonna happen, but that's.
the chances of this actually happening. But
I mean, I would take odds if this is.
the problem is Robert's a little like, okay, so what if it does? We're not gonna be able to follow the bylaw because you're not gonna meet the requirements of notification to members of a vote. So he's like, if that happened, all I'm gonna do is get up there and say, well, we have to table the matter because we have to give appropriate notification to members that there's a vote to be taken.
Coin flip the first time.
Or you can do that.
That's what I'm, is there something else we could do?
Actually, that's a legit. I mean, the chances of this happening are slim.
Well, that's, yeah.
Where you talk about it likely.
Next.
Yeah, just leave.
Leave it as is?
Yeah.
As the red lines are, right? Okay. Tenure, that's just cleanup. 409. He just reworded all this to be a little bit cleaner. I don't really think there's any substance in here. I know there's no. 410. That's from the 8 to 7. And then 417, he defined. principal. 503 is just cleaning up the whole mail thing. Unclaimed funds of members, so we went ahead and cleaned that up. Did you know that was in here? Page 32. So we officially change it from permanent equity capital or permanent equity donated capital, which we just already talked about. I think that's it. So we could go up above and change that sentence if you have wording, or we can wait, it doesn't really matter.
Well, I mean, I think next month, unless there's any urgency here, we could get his opinion. I mean, I guess we could just.
It doesn't matter to me anyway.
And then just look at it and say we're good with the rest of it.
So the two things I got, remove those two committee words, reword this, what's in yellow. It sounds like all we gotta do is put a period there. Yep.
Go back to 417 a minute. I don't know why I'm hung up on that for a second. So, principal is a director or employee of the RMC. Doesn't. Maybe it's because I had the grant committee. The same.
So as used in the Bible, it's a close relative, means a person, blood, marriage, including step.
Yeah, but you can't run for nominating committee, is that right? Here's my question. No, not really. Does anybody here take my question?
Saying you need to add nominating committee people to that?
Yeah. Do you agree with that? Right?
You don't know, just saying, yeah, directors and employees. or-
Yeah, because I mean, don't we have the same, I guess my question is, don't we have the same requirement for
You
the
do.
nominating committee?
That's a good.
Yeah.
So it's not just a director, it's also
Or nominee, it's a director or nominating committee or employee.
yeah, okay. Yep, good catch. I think those are simple changes.
All right. So is everyone okay though to vote on this next month then based upon Greg getting with Robert? Okay. We good then? Yeah,
Got it. We're good.
So the next item is the law. He alluded to that earlier and he's going to talk a little bit more about it now.
We have $500,000 yet that we can borrow on our long-term money at RUS. We've been borrowing. We borrowed short-term money in August. We did pay it back in August. But with the, with capital credits going out with August, it's gonna take us several months at the minimum to pay that back. We can borrow it. I checked today, it's like 4.07%. Long-term money and short-term money, it's just under 7. So it's a lot cheaper to borrow it long-term. We can borrow it on RUS. More or less, yeah, I think we should borrow the money long-term and save 3%.
So your margins are running quite a bit ahead of where you thought they were gonna be. So why can't we use that money to pay this short term back? Or number two, what if we use the Hoosier retirement that we're gonna get about 700,000 at the end of November, December to pay the short line back?
I mean, that is an option. I guess I also look at it as we can borrow at 4% and we can prepay Hoosier each month too, and we can make 2.5%. Well,
But you're really not gonna get the full 2.5% unless you have money sitting at Hoosier at all times. What do you, the most you're gonna get is what, a couple weeks?
2 to 3, yeah.
So that number's in half now. Cause they're only gonna give you credit for when they have it.
It's when the difference, the time they have the money is from when they send the first bill to when it's due. It's about a week span.
I understand the short-term view of the interest rates, but that $500,000 on the 30-year note, even though it's at 4.07%, is a lot of interest. I mean, when we may be able to pull another lever to get, pay it for a few months until you can pay it off, and then you get the retirement from Hoosier and then finish paying it off. Unless you're telling me that you need that money from Hoosier to make your cash flow to the end of the year.
I mean, we're gonna, with the costs that are coming in the next couple months with polls and everything else, we're gonna be borrowing money on the short term line of credit to the end. I mean, maybe pay some of it here and there depending on. I guess what I'm trying to say is we can always prepay Hoosier, which we're not doing now. So from now until the end of the year, there is a way to mitigate some of the cost of the borrow.
Sure, I understand that. Okay, so what about the interest rate environment?
Long-term money at 4%, I guess I feel like still a pretty good deal. It's cheaper than it's been in a year and a half, but are we gonna go into a major recession? I mean, it could get lower. I mean, I'm not gonna say it's not. I mean, 4% is less than our average borrowing rate. So I mean, it's under our long-term average currently, so.
So when you did your cash flow projections for the year, how much money did you think we were gonna get in retirements from Hoosier?
I mean, we plugged in the number we always do.
It's got the special in there too.
Yeah.
We know what those amounts are.
I mean, we
just approved.
We plugged in borrowing $500,000 in July is what we plugged in, or June, I think it was, is what the cash flow showed. Check here real quick.
The planned long-term.
The planned long-term borrowing was $500,000 in June. If you look at the cash projection sheet in there, we're gonna need the money.
But it's in your graph, it falls off drastically in December.
That's because there's lots of stuff we get. As things go along. So say, for instance, right away, we haven't been paying it at the rate as the year. We make sure I put it in December because it's gonna happen this year. It's just a matter of if it happens in December or maybe January, or it might happen in November. I mean, as things with the polls getting started now, that cliff is gonna come sooner.
Okay, so back to question number one then. Margins are running quite a bit ahead of where we expected them to be.
Make a turnaround quick.
250, yeah. I mean, we're about 250 ahead of where we expected on a gross margin.
So based on what you presented us tonight, if you take Hoosier prepay out of the equation of borrowing, there's really not a need this minute to borrow.
I mean, we borrowed short-term money for 3 weeks or for 2.5 weeks this month. So, I mean.
But the interest on that versus a 30-year at 4.25 is minimal. Correct?
I mean, we're paying 7.25 versus.
For 3 weeks versus 30 years at 4.25. That's minimal interest. I mean, that's not even really comparable. As of right now.
But I think he's saying he can't pay that short-term line off right now. Is that correct?
We paid it off this month, but we won't be able to next month.
Oh,
So you're gonna keep that short term.
It's gonna hang out.
It's gonna stay there.
I mean, we pay it off any chance we get. Sure. We paid it before we prepaid Hoosier because it was higher rate. I mean, we're always gonna pay whatever costs the most.
And the other thing you got to remember too on this one is, and we always kind of forget to state this, but the money he's looking at borrowing is stuff that we've already put in the ground.
Right.
It's just we used members' money instead of this.
But I think that there's gonna be ample opportunity to borrow money coming up. And with the fiber project, right? I mean, we're gonna have to, I think we're gonna be borrowing a lot of money to get that done.
Yes. I won't disagree with that one bit.
You're just talking about 500,000 for 30 years is what you're talking about.
Yeah, that's all that's left to finish off our US loan is the 500,000. Once we borrow that, that loan is done. And then we'll have to do an entirely new construction work plan in order to be able to borrow from our US.
You remember when that money is no longer? Got a year or two?
I think we have another year to borrow that I mean, we want to borrow this money before we borrow anything else. I mean, this is the cheapest money this is the cheapest lever we can pull.
And you've already done all the legwork. RUS is all the legwork.
Yes.
And it's already there and
Yes.
I understand that.
No, I mean, we pull this long before we pull anything from anywhere else. I mean, that's,
But we can still pull it next month, just the question is what the interest will be.
yeah, I mean.
It's not like it's
If
line of
you
credit's
knew what the
going away.
interest was gonna be, I mean, when I wrote this up earlier this month, interest has fallen about 20 basis points since then. So I mean,
So the line of credits, there's just a matter of the interest is what the
Is
question.
their line of credit fall too?
the line of credit will follow the Fed funds. So if the Fed funds lowers it next month, it'll drop to 7. If they lower it a quarter, it'll drop to 7% come October. So. I mean, the long-term money goes with it somewhat, but not completely. I mean, 30-year money is cheaper than 20-year money for some reason. I get that, but that's how it is. So. I think it probably has, from what I have read, it has to do with the liquidity and the depth of the federal. Because effectively, our US money is what the federal government borrows, and the federal government does a lot more 30-year than 20-year money. So there's more appetite, I guess, for 30-year money than 20-year money. My thought would be to borrow 30 years, you keep one line of credit. That's based off where the rate curve is. I mean, 30-year money is the cheapest money out there. So I'd either take that or I'd keep it on short term.
Yeah, you have any thoughts?
Oh, I'm just sitting here going back and forth between what I've heard Suzanne and Jason say. I mean, I fundamentally have a difficulty in taking debt and because I get a better interest rate spreading it out over a long, that's to me like buying a car and amortizing it over 30 years because I get a better rate. But to Jason's point, at the end of it, at 30 years, I'm paying a whole lot more for that car than I am the purchase price. That being said, the 500,000 is not something we specific, I mean, it's money we borrow against stuff we put in the ground. It's everything we've done. So shifting it makes some sense in that respect. I don't necessarily see the urgency for doing something right now. I'm inclined to, my gut feel tells me that the rates may go down a little bit more than where they are right now. Obviously,
And my crystal ball says unclear.
don't have
Sure.
a crystal.
Cannot determine,
They're not determined, yeah.
ask later.
Back later. We can tell you in 6 months what the best thing to do would be.
We could leave this on the agenda.
I mean, at the end of the day, we have 30-year money for stuff that we bought that'll last us 40 years. But that's, I mean, that's all, doing nothing is always a fine option too. I mean, I'm not,
To me, it's
just know that we will be borrowing short-term money going forward.
But if we have a problem paying off that short-term money, that's where I would.
That's gonna happen. I I mean, this is the first month we borrowed it. Next month, we're gonna, with this month, with capital credits, it reduces our money, because a lot of people get the capital credits against their bills, so it puts a pretty good debt in our cash coming in. Doesn't change our revenue or but it changes our cash. I mean,
Been building a little cushion. We're running a little
our
fast.
cushion fell some this past month. Our cushion's gonna fall even more next month. I mean,
I like the, let's wait and see what happens.
Well, I was, to me, it's an issue that's fluid, liquid, to the point, maybe it's something we need to review every month.
Yeah, I mean, there's no,
I don't see any harm in doing that.
Or an action between meetings if there's.
Yeah, if
something
something
that happens.
dramatically changes.
I mean, if interest drops below a certain amount, like we talked about in years past, hey, let's get every dollar we can, just because I don't foresee that ever happening again, though, unfortunately, but you never know. I mean, stranger things have happened.
all right, everybody's good with waiting that and certainly keep us up to date and, you know.
Yeah, I mean, interest has fallen in the last month. I mean, as I would, I mean, if the economic data keeps coming out, and I mean, a lot of it depends on how scared people are. I mean, if people have fear, the interest rate goes down. It's the age-old adage, greed and fear.
Right, we'll hear more next month if not before then. So the next item is the operations building.
Yeah, so I just was going to mention this just to kind of give everybody an update. So our plan would be, we really need to know what is going to happen with fiber, right? That, to me, it makes no sense to go spend a bunch of money on a architect if we need to house 10 people compared to one bunch of extra trucks, you know, so that could come as soon as Q1 next year. So the schedule would be, as soon as we find out from B, we're going to be bringing in a proposal to go forward with an architect and a building design. So that ask is going to be around Q1, into Q1, Q2, whenever we find out from B. So I just want to let you guys all know. We find out by then, it'll come earlier than then. I think there's some pretty strong feelings in the back that they need a different facility back there. And so I'm going to be bringing it forward. But I don't think you can make a decision without knowing what fiber looks like. So, but the steps would be, I would come in and say, roughly, this is what it's going to cost. And then we would ask to move forward with an architectural dollars, which I know we had approved years ago, but we'll ask for those dollars. But I don't want to spend $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 on an architect. I don't know if that's even a correct number, Dale, but without having some sort of agreement that we would move forward. So more or less, it's just kind of give you an update. That's where our schedule.
Kind of wait, yeah, I get it. All right, the next item, executive contract. We've talked through this numerous times. I think we had a final outcome that we all kind of determined was good. It's at this time that we need to go ahead and make a motion to approve it, to support effective July 1 Brent's contract. So we need a motion. You made a motion? Sure. Motion to approve. Second? Dale, second. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, the same. Unanimous. All right, so that leads us into affiliated organizations. Brian, you have any updates on anything? All right, how about you, Jason?
Real quick, we had a Hoosier board meeting on July 8th in Bloomington. We went over the gas plant. As I told you guys, we purchased the St. Joe Energy gas fired power plant, 740 megawatt in northern Indiana. It's a PJM asset, and we will be transferring it. Hoosier will be transferring it to mine. We also approved these regular patronage and special patronage retirements. As I mentioned, those will be going out pending RUS approval, which we don't foresee any problem with that by the end of the year. And we are going to tour St. Joe's the first week of October. I don't know the date, maybe the 4th of October. We're gonna go to St. Joe's. We're gonna tour the gas facility, and then we're gonna go to the nuclear facility in Michigan the next day. Pending our background checks. Apparently, they don't let just anybody into a nuclear power plant. I haven't heard back to see if I'm approved. I may not be going. Yeah. So apparently they don't let anybody just go in there. So anyway, that'll be kind of neat to go through.
National security risk.
Yeah, like Back to the Future, you know, the uranium guys. Anyway, that's really about it for now.
Okay. As far as the IT board, we did do something a little bit different in August. We had regional breakout sessions. I mean, it suffice our monthly board meeting or every other board meeting that we have, but so it was held up in Henry County, so Bartholomew County, Peter County, West Shelby, Whitewater were a part of this, and it was just an opportunity for 5 RMCs to meet and just talk through a few things. They had a District 54 State Representative, Corey Criswell, there, and there was a lot of discussion on pull attachments at that time. He's fairly new in as a state rep, but I think his heart's in it, where he's going to, you know, ask a lot of questions along the way, get some answers for the good. The other thing that was discussed, the other big item, was the IC annual meeting discussion. Right now, you know, it's a 2-day venture. And I think they have that location under contract until 2027. But we had some input on, should we go to 1 day? Is 1 day sufficient? And all the other regional meetings, we'll combine data to see what was recommended. But my assumption is that we'll go to potentially a 1-day meeting. We're still offering classes probably the day before. But again, that's just my opinion. Other than that, that's all we had. We will have a regular board meeting in October with all the RMCs at the facility. Any questions? Next item, any director training conferences that were attended?
I didn't go to training, but this is something I thought was interesting for a board to know. So my daughter just recently moved to Arizona, and through her hooking up to her utilities, called the utility company, there were 6 options to pick from. And I said, what would you suggest? She's in a 500 square foot apartment. What would you suggest? Per legal, we are not allowed to advise you what packages to choose. Okay. So if you were in a 500 square foot apartment, which package would you choose? Per legal.
Wait, no.
So I said, what's the cheapest package you have? Well, the cheapest package we have is the lowest rate. However, based on usage from 4 to 8, your rate will vary. Currently, with the average temperature being 111 to 115, 3 to 4 times the rate between 4 and 8 o'clock. So I'm like, the only thing that needs to be running is your refrigerator. But I just thought that was very interesting to have 6 options to pick from.
Sure.
And basically you pick which option you want, and not with a lot of education given. You know, it wasn't really,
Right.
it wasn't like a book of pamphlets. It was basically, here's a summary. So I just felt as a board member, I'm listening to that. I'm like, okay, so the rates will go down from 4 to 8 eventually, but based on usage currently with temperatures being
Sure.
110 plus every day for 55 days. now set a record.
Can she change can she change her package as she goes or once she?
Can change within 6 months, but she will not get her initial deposit back. But then when they ran it under myself, because she doesn't have any credit, I didn't have to do a deposit under my name. It's under my name. So in 6 months, you can change without. But if you did change and had a deposit, you would lose your deposit within 6 months if you changed it. But I'm like, what's the cheapest you got? Because it's 500 square feet. It's not, it's one person. So I thought as a board member, that was kind of interesting to deal with someone who basically said, per legal, we are not allowed to give you any suggestions.
You may want to read the fine prints of that, because if you got the cheapest one, you may have got the one that.
Well, based on the other apartment owners that I talked to, that's what they got too. So, but I felt comfortable after I talked to a couple of them, but I was like, okay.
Some of those they're not G&Ts, so they're paper companies. So it's literally somebody in the basement that's buying off the market. And if the market goes like it did the other day, you could be paying $150 an hour.
Well, based on her apartment advice, because she can't control, modern day, you control everything with your phone. So she can crank her air conditioning up to 85 on her phone. And the only thing that would physically be running would be the refrigerator. So.
You want me to look at
I
it?
mean, is the longevity of her being there is that, I mean,
2 years.
4 years, 6
2 years, yeah.
2 years.
I just thought that was interesting to.
That's the issue they had in Texas, was they were a lot of paper companies. And if you looked at the cheapest, well, how many years was it cheap on the market? Well, then all of a sudden it's like one day it was $500 a megawatt hour. It's like, I mean, people.
After I talked to the apartment complex people, I felt better when we called back, but at the time I'm like, oh, okay. We're not used to that many options.
Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, I just thought that was interesting.
Anybody else have any conferences they attended? No? Any other friends?
That was the Hoosier Board Forum thing.
This is
No report.
no report. How about you, Steve?
I had the French Lick CCD, my final class.
Okay.
6:30, so strategic planning. The instructor, Scott, he tied a lot of things together other than just that class, so it went through all of them. everything
Right.
kinda-
Who's your instructor?
Scott LaCal,
Oh,
he was probably one of them.
Yep.
Scott LaCal.
Well,
And we had the director's retreat as well, so.
with Brian Singletary. And I know last year when I attended, there was a lot of discussion around culture and things of that nature. Was a kind of a continuation of that.
Kind of continuation of that, yeah, we had a lot of table discussions about different agendas and things like that, of how boards in.
All right, anybody have? It was after the last.
of July.
Yeah, after the last. Anything else from anybody? Before we adjourn, I do want to make a comment. I'm not so sure everyone was aware of it. I didn't check my email until, well, there was a letter that came to all of us today. And there were some asks in there. When I say asks, they wanted some responses and things of that nature. I think we will talk more about that letter in an executive session, but I was just wondering if there's anything to be brought up based upon the letter that we received today.
I read the email and the signatures were on it, and I believe that all those members were invited to the meeting that we had here with the rate consultant and the representative from Hoosier Energy and the staff. And none of those members chose to come to the meeting to get their questions answered. Is that correct?
And weren't those questions answered through a YouTube video that was linked to them?
Well, I know there were a couple different YouTube videos that were linked that had the end, but again,
And obviously, whoever prepared the letter has been misinformed.
do you have anything else in open session? So I'm ready for a motion to adjourn.
I'll make it.
We got a motion to adjourn. We are adjourned. We will go into executive session in about 5 minutes.